Education Subcommittee on Nominations to order. As Chairman of the Education Subcommittee on Nominations, fielded several questions over the past few weeks about Dr. Taylor and his nomination. I thought it best, in an effort to be as transparent as possible, to have a hearing where we will not be voting today, but have a hearing where we could allow Dr. Taylor to answer questions that committee members have, as well as other members of the Senate. I'd like to ask that Senate members be respectful of time. We may have several questions, and so please be precise with your questions, and let's, once you get an answer, let's move forward. At this time, I'd like to get Dr. Taylor and Ms. Rosemary Altman to come to the podium and each introduce themselves briefly, and then we will begin with questions.
Good afternoon. I'm Rosemary Altman. I'm currently serving as chair of the State Board of Education. My background is in education for the most part. I'm a former first grade teacher. I'm a former local school board member. I served 20 years as the mayor of our town in Clinton. And after I retired from that service, the Speaker Gunn, asked me if I would serve on the State Board of Education, and it has been my honor to do so. My background, as I said, either I have been directly or indirectly involved in education all my life, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. So I will stop with that and let Dr. Taylor introduce himself, and then if you have questions, we'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Mrs. Altman. Good afternoon to the members of the Senate Committee. My name is Robert Taylor. I'm a native of Laurel, Mississippi, born and raised there, attended the University of Southern Mississippi. I've been an educator for the past 30 years. My wife is Vivian Taylor. She's a retired colonel in the military, and we've spent the last 30 years in North Carolina. That is the reason I've been there, and I had an opportunity to learn so much about the education of children, both in schools, at the district level, and at the state level. I certainly welcome the opportunity to answer any questions that members have about my educational experience, my past as a Mississippi resident. I believe in transparency. I believe that the greatest job, one of the greatest decisions that you make is selecting the person approving the appointment of the board of your state superintendent. We know that is the largest part of your budget. You're going to have questions about how I see the future of education. I believe that my experience in my past helps me uniquely understand what's needed in Mississippi and how we continue to do the work that has moved Mississippi forward. You all have invested so much in education. I want to make sure that I continue that relationship, not only with members of this body, but with constituents across the state. So I look forward to talking with you and answering anything that I can to help you understand where I see Mississippi headed in education. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we open up to questions, I do want to point out to the committee, we have Dr. Taylor obviously here to answer questions about himself, his thoughts on education, and how he plans to manage the Department of Education. And then if you have any questions about the process of selection that the board used, we will direct those at Ms. Altman. At this time, we'll open it up for questions. I don't see any. That was pretty quick. Cinder Hill.
My question would be for Dr. Altman. My first question. Thank you for being here today. My question is about the process and how the position was decided, how it was scored, and basically from what I have read, that There was basically no scoring rubric based on core competencies of the position. I've been a teacher before and I've been evaluated, and I know that there was a rubric and there were certain things that I had to meet. And from what we're getting from peer is that there was no set cutoff. There was no set way to score. It was basically not mathematical. And also, we're also knowing that none of the applicants or none of the finalists were made public, and this was all done by the decision of the board. I understand that the company that y'all hired typically suggests to be public with at least a finalist, and the board decided to not make any of this public. And can you speak to those things?
I can. We, speaking collectively, the board hired a consulting firm after we had requested proposals and gone through the proper procurement process. And the consultant helped us determine the things that were important after we had done a lot of surveying through teachers, superintendents, legislative leaders. We developed a candidate profile. The scoring system was, I appointed a subcommittee who developed a rubric to be able to score the proposals that we had. We listened to all four consulting firms, chose the consulting firm. They helped us with the scoring. Then we interviewed the candidates that rose to the top, and just this may answer another question. We had 26 people who filed applications. 18 of those completed the application and met all the requirements. And of those 18, 7 bubbled to the top based on the scoring. And we, as part of the application process, each applicant had to submit a video. We watched all 7 videos. We spent a day and a half doing that and going through their resumes, looking at all their credentials. And from that, we chose 4 to interview. There were 3 males, 1 female, 2 African Americans, 2 Caucasians. And from that, then we scored again, and Dr. Taylor was our top scorer. We brought him back in, spent 4 hours with him one day, interviewing him after he'd already spent 2 hours in the first interview. And we interviewed him. Then the leadership team came in, went through what they do. And he asked questions, they asked questions, and then the board made their decision. As far as the privacy of the applicants, it was a discussion with the consultant who really recommended to us that that we keep the applicants private. And the reason for that is a lot of times applicants apply, and if their district or their supervisor or their superintendent or whatever finds out, it has an impact on them. And one of the things that they told us is that not to get concerned at the beginning, that we might not have many applicants, but there would be a flurry of applicants by October 21st, which was our deadline, I believe. And so, and that was true. We would have inquiries, but true applications didn't start rolling in until mid to late October. We made a commitment to each applicant, and particularly a couple of them from here in Mississippi wanted to make certain that their application remained anonymous, and we have continued to honor that commitment.
Okay, thank you for that response. The information that we have in front of us says that the board's selection process through McPherson and Jacobson proposed that the finalists for the position be named publicly. However, the board chose to keep the names confidential until the candidate had been selected and the voting was completed. So we've got some discrepancy in what some of these questions may have been answered to the peer committee.
Well,
So I'm not saying who's right or who's wrong. I'm just saying that we were given other information. And our concern came from that, and also from the fact that recently Alabama and Louisiana both conducted similar selection processes for state superintendent, and theirs were transparent. They did publish their finalists. Louisiana even published the resumes and allowed public feedback through an online portal. So that was just some questions and concerns that we had, because Dr. Taylor mentioned how important transparency was when he just introduced himself, and I agree with him. So it seems strange that our neighboring states were fully transparent when they were conducting their search and picking a superintendent by publishing their finalists and letting the public know, that they gotten it down to finalists. They published their application packets, their resumes, their letters of recommendation, but yet we knew nothing until we had somebody hired. So I guess that was my question, is why it was so different in Mississippi than our neighboring states.
Well, I can't answer for the other states. Everybody does things differently, but we honored the requests of some of the applicants, actually some of the finalists who wanted to remain anonymous or keep it private. You made another point that now I've forgotten what I was going to say, but there was no, the idea was not to be, not be transparent about it. We were simply trying, it's the responsibility of the board to do this, and we were simply trying to honor the request that came to us. There was a tremendous amount of time spent on this. The board traveled a lot of days to be able to review resumes. We felt confident that we came through with the right person. We felt confident that we had done our due diligence and that we had good applicants in the end. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you.
Senator Wiggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my questions, Ms. Altman, are along the same lines, and but I want to be a little more specific and allow you to respond. And so I was just going to highlight some of those things. But first, according to the peer report, we on the Senate Education Committee received, or y'all, let me back up. Y'all sent out stakeholder feedback where you sent it to a lot of people, and that included Senate Education Committee chairs. I don't remember getting that. I may have, but that was in 2022. I don't remember getting that. And so if you could explain that. And then next, to Senator Hill's points, our information states that all board members participated in interviews with the candidates. However, the board did not use a scoring or ranking system to evaluate the candidates. The board members evaluated and discussed each candidate. Then it goes on to state that the board chose to conduct its business in private by keeping all names confidential, which impacted transparency. If the board had followed the proposal of the consultant, the names of the 4 finalists would have been released publicly. Then it goes on to say that neither the consultants nor the board provided documentation of a detailed scoring methodology to ensure objectivity in the comparison of applicants against each other. This methodology, if it had been provided, would be expected of such a critical selection process. So can you please comment or respond to those?
The stakeholder feedback, I'll address that first. The questionnaire was developed asking, and they were emailed for the most part. I can't answer why you didn't get one, but they were emailed, and the stakeholder questionnaire was developed and sent to superintendents across the state, teachers, to business leaders, to the legislative leadership. It went through the department and the board. All listed what they thought were the important qualities or the critical qualities that we were looking for in a superintendent. From that, we we, meaning the department and the board, developed a candidate profile. And that went out in the release along with the job description as to what was expected. We got a good bit of feedback and a good bit of feedback from the legislative body who received it. So all of that was compiled, as I said, into the candidate profile. To answer, does that answer your question? As far as
It does on that part of it. yes.
okay, then as far as the keeping the names private, I think I've already made it clear that that was the request of some of the applicants. And, you know, if you do it for one, we were doing it for all. As far as the ranking is concerned, Dr. McGee, he is here today, and I think he can, he's on our board, and he will verify that we, after each candidate, after we did all of our interviews, we ranked the candidates based on what their scoring was. We felt a 1, 2, 3, 4. We compiled all those. We had a checklist of what we were going through. And from that, the top 4, when we got ready to interview in person, were our choices. Then we did the same process. We took all 4 candidates, listened, we did this over a 2-day period, interviewed them, asked them questions, they asked us questions, and then we ranked them again.
Okay, so some follow-up questions. So it stated that the peer committee asked the board whether it developed a cutoff score or ranking system to determine who would be interviewed, and the board did not give any information and rather suggested that a cutoff score ranking system was not used. So
We did not have a cutoff score. That's
Okay.
true.
well,
go
according
ahead,
to
I'm sorry.
peer, that would have been necessary and proper, and yet y'all chose not to do that. Rather, you stated that you worked as a team and just decided to discuss it amongst yourselves. Is that
We
what
had-
happened?
Yes, basically, we ranked them.
So you
Yes.
did reject a cutoff score,
Well, there was never an issue about a cutoff score.
even though the consultant recommended it or peer suggests that it should have happened.
We did not have a cutoff score. Our attorney was there with us the whole step of the way. And, but to answer your question, there was not a cutoff score. We ranked each candidate based on their answers to the questions that we had.
Okay, so, and then to follow up, as Pierre stated, no detailed methodology was provided. And that would have ensured objectivity in the comparison of applicants against each other. And as they say, Pierre, meaning this methodology would be expected of such a critical selection process. So y'all did not do a scoring methodology. It's certainly not one that was made public. Is that correct?
That is correct. I've already answered. We ranked them. And, you know, if
You ranked them
Sorry.
based on your own kind of
based
sitting
on the
around public.
answers to to the questions that were asked. And if you're interviewing 4 people, it's pretty easy to make those comparisons as to who.
But
had-
it's not scientific.
Well, no, maybe not scientific as far as that goes, but, you know, as to who had the grasp of knowledge, as to who had the expertise, those things. So the questions were the same for each candidate. In the first round of questions, we used the same questions for each
Okay.
candidate. So you could make those comparisons.
And you said that you don't control Alabama or Louisiana, but Alabama and Louisiana use that process. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I will likely have 1 or 2 more questions at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you. Senator Jordan?
I would like to ask Dr. Taylor, since he's been so heavily involved in North Carolina school system from, I assume from K through 12. I would like to know from you, how does North Carolina rank nationally compared to where we are here in our beloved state of Mississippi? What have you done there to make them rank? And how do they rank first? And talk to me about that.
So
Josh.
there are multiple measures that rank schools in terms.
K through 12?
Say again?
K through 12?
Yes, K-12 schools. And so there are a number of methodologies that rank districts and schools and states, and depending on the methodology that you use, they could be high, middle, low. North Carolina is always ranked as a leader in education, K-12 education. Much of that is based on the investment that they make in education, the training that administrators get, the teachers get, that collaboration across the state. And like Mississippi, there are pockets of excellence, and then there are pockets where districts struggle. And so I have the opportunity to.
Well, I'm not talking about the pockets that generally for the state of North Carolina compared to the state of Mississippi, K through 12. That's primarily what I'm concerned about. And I noticed you have been there in North Carolina for decades, and you've been heavily involved.
And so part of that is based on the state's assessment system. Is one of the more rigorous ones that we have in the nation. Obviously, states have the opportunity to measure their state assessments as at a minimum of what the federal government requires. You can actually go above that. North Carolina has done that. And so it really is about the investment in training of teachers and administrators to make sure that they can properly educate children. So we've also had the opportunity to learn from Mississippi as well in terms of what we've done with literacy education. And so while we rank high in reading scores, we certainly want to do better. And so North Carolina is now looking at what we've done in Mississippi, but they have always ranked high in terms of performance on national measures. And so I think I thought that was of particular interest that the board had in me in terms of the knowledge that I had acquired for the last 30 years and the ability to be able to couple that with work that's being done in Mississippi.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. You're a native son of Mississippi, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Senator McClendon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Blunt.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. There may be more questions for Dr. Taylor, but I'd like to get back to Ms. Altman, if I may, Mayor Altman, I should say. I would just like to hear from you on behalf of the board. What were the qualities that led you and the board to select Dr. Taylor? And do you believe he is the best person for the job?
As I said, we developed a candidate profile. We were looking first and foremost for a leader. We were looking for someone who had a deep knowledge of educational rigor, of someone who understood the process, of someone who had been a leader in their state, in the educational area, someone who had been exposed to national organizations, who had participated in national boards, who could represent our state on the national level. We were looking for someone who had the knowledge of federal programs, because that is the most difficult part of managing the department, is all the money that comes in through federal programs and all the requirements that are involved with those, and to making certain that we're abiding by all those regulations. But one of the most critical things we were looking for was someone who had experience in district turnaround, because it has been a burden on our board that while we have some school districts that all you have to do is open the doors and the kids come in and they do great, we still have school districts that are struggling. And we've tried to move the needle. We want them to show progress, because we're losing children. And that is a great burden on us. And so we looked for someone who had a background in low performing school districts and working with low performing school districts. And Dr. Taylor has that. We also, of course, obviously wanted someone who could work with the legislature, someone who had had experience in working with governmental agencies and governmental bodies, and who could tell the story, who could sell our product, so to speak. I mean, this is a big job. Also, someone who could work with teachers and who had a knowledge of school administration and how to work with administrators and teachers. And then I think, of course, most importantly, someone who loves children and someone who has a commitment to making life better for the children of this state. Now, that's a lot, but I mean, that's not all, but you know, we just felt like then once we went through all of it, we talked to everyone, and it is a big stretch to go from a local district superintendent to being the state superintendent. I mean, it's not impossible, but it is a difficult task. And so having had been a local, well, having been a classroom teacher, actually, and then having been a principal and then a local superintendent and having State Department experience, certainly marked all the boxes.
Senator Boyd.
Thank you. My questions are for Dr. Taylor.
Okay.
Dr. Taylor, I told you I was going to ask this question, so I told you this a number of months ago. Chairman Altman brought up the fact of we're talking about low performing schools. That is one of the thing that significantly impacts our state are our low performing schools. And so you've had a chance now, a couple of months, to look at our low performing schools. Can you tell us what your roadmap is to help those school districts out and lead our state in this arena?
Thank you, Senator Boyd. I can tell you that I've had the opportunity over the last month or so to visit every low-performing district in the state, except for one, and that was because of a scheduling conflict. And the themes are the same. It really is about teachers not having the capacity to be able to deliver quality instruction, districts not having the resources, districts having poor facilities, leadership not understanding what the instructional program should look like, and whether or not staff is being trained properly. That roadmap for me is really about the department being a capacity building organization. I've shared with all of those superintendents and their leadership that it is our duty and responsibility to be able to get in and work with those districts before they end up on the list being taken over by the state. So we don't have the capacity to take over 10 or 11 districts, but we do have the ability to be able to get into those districts and help them build capacity. One of those things would be, if you look at the technology infrastructure, the specific question that I asked all was, what is your plan for post ESSER funds when those funds run out in 2024 and the legislature has given you funds to be able to buy devices? What is your plan going to be? Many of those districts have really good plans. Some don't have an idea. And so my goal is to make sure that we can get our MDE staff in and talk with them about how to properly plan out that technology landscape for the future, how to use the proper funding to be able to support that, how to train the staff to be able to have robust networks. When we think about the instructional piece, what we find is that that instructional piece in terms of the rigor that they need to understand, they don't know. So we've invested quite a bit in literacy coaches. They have the opportunity to be able to go into those districts and then be able to support those teachers through coaching methods to say, this is how you properly provide that instruction. Specifically, what I am going to do is have a deputy that will be over school improvement. And so that goal would be to coordinate all of the state resources to put specifically towards those districts that need that kind of help. So that means that we go in, we have professional development with the teachers, we have professional development with the administrators, we provide support to the district leadership. So many of those things we already have in place, we want to be able to enhance those. So if we have things such as office hours with the special ed department, they talk to me about how they have the opportunity to call and talk with the State Department on a weekly basis about programmatic issues. So what we absolutely see is that they don't have the capacity all the times. It could be the difference between having a quality academic officer and not having a quality academic officer. And so those are the things that we know we can specifically do to get in and help those districts to improve.
Just as a follow-up to that, I know that we talked about, we've got some issues with teacher shortages in those districts. Do you have a plan to recruit quality instructors to those particular districts? Do you have a plan right now? Are you trying to develop a plan? Give us some feedback on that.
So that is about using the resources that we have now, as well as developing new ways to do that. And so we have our teacher residency program, and that is perhaps one of the greatest things that gives people with degrees the opportunity to go into education, both get teacher licensure as well as special ed licensure. So you get two things. And so that is an opportunity that they have exposure to a program. We've made changes in terms of how there can be alternative licensure coming into elementary ed. Now people have to matriculate through the program and pass the test. They're not able to do that. So it's about making sure that they have exposure to those programs that already exist. The biggest help that's going to be for these districts is how they engage in what we call grow your own. And so they have plenty of teacher assistants that have quality or have degrees. And so we want to make sure that we can help them put those structures in place to be able to take those teacher assistants that live in that community. Once they become educated, they're the ones that are not going to move away. Ultimately, I've been doing work with universities about how we get more children interested in education. So we do have what I would call high school internships, where they're able to go down to elementary schools. I had an opportunity to talk with a group at William Carey University. And so those students, high school students, are absolutely bought into the idea of education. And so while we can do all of those small things to get kids interested, adults into education, the more specific things that we've got to do is look at how we can develop a quality, what I would call teacher fellowship program, where we say to a student, you go to a university, we pay for your schooling, and in turn, you give us an identified number of years of service in identified districts that meet the qualifications or standards that we say. And so that does give them the ability to be able to get those teachers there. A lot of the work also has to do with showing districts how you build capacity in supporting teachers. Everything is not always financial. There are going to be some districts that cannot give the $3,000 supplement like the district next door. They can only give $300, but they can give quality professional development. They can support them. They can pay for benefits. And so there are the small things that we can do, but to solve the what I call the systemic problem of teacher shortage is probably a 6 to 8 year process, because it is about getting more students into the schools of education and graduating. Just for statistics note, universities in Mississippi put out about 12 or 1,300 education graduates, and 631 or 32 came from William Carey University. So that lets you know the number is small. If we need annually 3,000 teachers, we're only hitting it by half. So it's doing grow your own programs, doing the teacher residency program, and then getting more students in our schools of education so we can have access to even more students, teachers.
Following up on that, Dr. Taylor, did you have experience, and I probably should know the answer, in North Carolina? Did you ever work at an underperforming school and have experience kind of leading that school?
Yes, ma'am. So my first principalship was at an elementary school, a K-5 school. It was a low performing school. And at that time we had an assessment system that identified a school as exemplary. And so the work that I did my first year at that school was the first time that it ever made exemplary growth. And so that was some of the best experience that I had as a school leader, to be able to go into a low performing school, high minority school, and be able to academically get that school in the performance level. I had the same kind of experience as a school teacher. I worked at Douglasburg Middle School, which was the largest middle school in North Carolina, had roughly 1,500 students, and we had exemplary growth. All the years that I was there, that particular school was fed by 3 housing projects. But what I learned is that a teacher who invests in children can get them to learn anything. So that means that as a teacher, I had 94, 95% proficiency on the computer skills that I taught. As a school, we had 80% growth, and that was based on the model that we had then. And as a principal in the school that was a low performing school, we got what was called exemplary growth, which was the highest that you could get.
Dr. Taylor, as you have plans for as you matriculate and have plans for these underperforming schools, I know that we as the legislature would love to see those plans in writing. And if you could share those with us, I know y'all do this internally, but we would,
Absolutely.
it kind of helps us in planning and that. So we would love to see some of this stuff going forward.
Thank you, Senator Boyd.
Senator Bryan.
Dr. Taylor, I was taken with a comment that Mayor Altman made, that there's some districts where you can just open the doors in the schools, to the schools, and the children come in and everything's fine. And there are other districts that are more difficult. And she said that she personally, the board institutionally, was concerned about those schools. And I know that the legislature institutionally has been concerned about that situation for a long time. And so, first of all, I'd bet a bunch of money, if I were going to bet, that if we took the per capita income, the average per capita income of the parents of the students in the school district, and any measure of achievement you want to take, test scores, pick one, in rank, compared the two, we just about have a 45-degree angle. This is not the only world in which the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But I think one of the mistakes that has been made, or one of the false impressions over the years, is that somehow they're going to be outside assistance or something that comes in and fixes a school district. If there's a poorly performing school district, somehow we can fix that externally. And I think schools are and always will be representative of their communities. And some communities are more functional than others. Some communities are more wealthy than others. But no matter where it is, if there's a school district that's in trouble, long-term, the solution for that school district is going to have to be people within the community where the school district has. But this is all a mighty long preface to my question, and I promise you there is going to be one. I understood, if I were to distill your previous comments, you see the State Department of Education as being a resource to all school districts, but in particular to struggling school districts, and the State Department of Education of finding a way to find within those struggling school districts the individuals that have potential, the individuals that are performing, and to try to work with them to have the basis for something within that community and within that school district to excel. And my question is, did I get that right? And is that one of the roles that you see as the role of the state superintendent and the role of the State Department of Education?
Yes, sir. I would say that that is correct, that our job is to help districts build capacity and build systems. But you are absolutely correct that the investment in the district and its well-being does come at the local level. And so I've been preaching this all across the state that while as a legislative body, you guys are going to provide funding to all districts, it is absolutely up to a local district how they supplement that, and they have to invest in themselves. We know that some don't have as much as others. Poor districts, is that much more important that they make that kind of investment in their school systems. And so our job is to make sure that we can go in and show that local board, show that local superintendent and that local district how you build capacity, how you train people, how you get the right kind of professional development, how you build a framework. We've already seen that that will be evidenced in many districts that we've had to go in. I think Tunica is one of those that is now about to be remanded back. And so that means that they have a structure now that that helps them to perform beyond where they were before. But that local district, that local community has to understand that if you revert back to doing those things that led you here, then you're going to get the same result. The only thing that we can do is to help establish a framework. And then it's up to that local community to make sure that they build and add to a framework that we know works. In terms of the economics of people, we absolutely understand that poverty is going to be related to school performance, but it's about how we work with those communities to understand the things that you can do that go beyond poverty, of how you get children to learn. So if you got a quality teacher that knows how to teach reading, they can teach a poor kid just as well as they can a wealthy kid. But the parents may not know that. Federal programs or Title I, a big component that they have is called family and community engagement, because they understand that changing that nature of the community is also what changes the school. So it is about how we help them build capacity, particularly in poor communities, but make sure they understand the importance of investing in themselves as well.
Well, I don't mean to be critical of anybody who's come before, because that's not my point, but I don't know how to discuss things without discussing areas of concern. I can tell you that school superintendents around the state feel somewhat alienated from the State Department of Education as an institution. We've talked for years about how the State Department should be a resource and also should be an advocate and a spokesman for public education. And I don't want to go into minutia about all this, but I think it is important for the state superintendent of education to have a relationship with the various superintendents, that they feel like somebody who understands their problems and is on their side is working with them. And I've understood through your comments that that was going to be one of the areas of focus.
Yes, sir. I think that has been the best part of this job so far, is be able to get out and get into districts and talk with educators, particularly superintendents. I've spoken at the MASS conference. I had an opportunity to speak at the State School Boards Association. It was probably 20 or 25 superintendents there. I've been to RESA meetings, and my plan is to go to every RESA meeting. The refreshing part about that conversation is that when superintendents speak with me, they know they're speaking to a colleague, because I know what it's like to serve as a superintendent, and I know the responsibility of a State Department. That is the role that we played at the time that I was at the State Department in North Carolina, to change how we serve districts from being regulatory to being a support agency. And everything that I've heard from superintendents, they say they like where I say I want to take the department. And so that's what I've seen. The department has continually moved towards being more service oriented, even though they have a regulatory arm. And they know that they plan to hold me accountable for that. They said, you said it, and we believe you, and we see you doing it, and we just want to continue seeing that happen from you as a state leader.
Well, just one more question. And again, I don't want to try to exactly be critical of what's gone on before, but there was a time when the State Department of Education institutionally and the education committees in the legislature worked very closely together. There were always representatives of the State Department at the education committee meetings. And there was some flap several years ago about whether the department did or did not accurately calculate the cost of a teacher pay raise, and whether the department did or did not understand that this was actually something the legislature was considering. I'm still sort of disturbed by that, because there was a time when a number of people, just off the top of their head, knew this is the cost of a $1,000 teacher pay raise. This is the cost of a 1% teacher pay raise. It knew how that affected federal and state money. I wasn't necessarily one of those people, but there were people at the State Department who just knew that. And if there was consideration being given to a teacher pay raise in this body, it would not come as a shock to the department. And so I'm hoping that one of the things you'll do is maintain closer relations with the legislature just for the purpose of being a resource and also for the purpose of talking to each other and finding out where the legislature's headed, where the department's headed, and trying to coordinate those things.
Absolutely. Our job is to work closely with the legislature. We can't do this work without you all. And I know that accuracy of data is something that we will always own. And our goal will always be to give you accurate information so you can make informed decisions.
Senator Wiggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Taylor, so I had the pleasure of meeting you and spending time with you. And I found you to be very engaging and very passionate about this job, and the fact that you've relocated your family here before even confirmation and dove in has been really good. And educationally, qualification, I find you qualified, and I think those boxes have been checked. Where my question is this, is that, and I know you know this, that we in Mississippi have made tremendous gains that, in my humble opinion, doesn't get talked about enough. From the record graduation rates to leading the nation on growth on NAEP scores to top 5 in the country in early education, amongst other things. But those decisions didn't, and those things working with others, not just the legislature, did not come easy. In fact, there was gnashing of teeth. There was political opposition. There was people who said, quite honestly, the legislature is bad. And yet the results are there. And so what I'm interested in is how you will continue to help us make those changes happen, and particularly in the face of opposition, because it will come. But I can tell you this, that the legislature as a whole, well, I don't want to speak for the whole legislature, but I think the track record says that we are about making changes for the betterment of our children. And so my question is, how do you see yourself handling those, and really, I guess, specifically standing in the face of those things, the pushback if it comes and all of that, so that we can get to where we need to be, which, as we've shown in the last 10 years, we've been making strides.
Thank you, Senator Wiggins. It is not often that I would disagree with a senator, particularly during a confirmation hearing. But I would disagree with you to say that Mississippi's work is well known around this country. And so if we as a state are not familiar with that or know that, then we are well known, and we are being sought after by people to understand what is it that you're doing in Mississippi. And so that's a friendly disagreement, you know that. But the one thing that I've assured everyone is that my job is not to come in and flip the table over and say, I'm going to change things because this is what I believe. This body and the MDE have all the proof necessary to show that the investment that you all have made, that investment is giving great returns. And so it is about how we begin to sharpen and hone that work to rub down those superfluous edges that we know need to be smoothed out, and particularly those low performing districts. So when we did our literacy work in Mississippi, a huge focus on the science of reading, that is what changed the nature of how our kids were able to grow on those NAEP assessments. But again, that kind of growth is all contingent upon a teacher knowing how to do that work, and a teacher being present to do that work. And so that is where I see my task is not changing any of the work that we do, but making that work even more productive. The work that we now want to do with math instruction, like we've done with literacy, that is a responsibility that we have. When we talk about providing that capacity to the low-performing districts so they can do the same kind of work. When we talk about giving even more training and professional development to administrators to go in and supervise those programs, to do that same kind of work with the district staff. And so it's not to be able to turn anything over, but to be able to show up and say that when you invest in the early learning collaborative, then 2/3 of those kids are kindergarten ready. And that is what makes the difference in the K-12 school, how well those kids are when they come prepared. So everything that I have in terms of what my priorities are as state superintendent, absolutely support the work that this body has done. And what we have to do is to continue to come here and show you the results of the money you've invested before we ask you for a single dime more.
But, and just to put a bow on top of it, for lack of a better term, it's about reforming. And when we know where we've been, but we have to reform to get better. And you're willing to stand there or help us do that, is my question.
Absolutely. The reform work is never easy. And you have to be strategic when you do that work. That has been my entire career. And so I stand firm with this body and the MDE and everybody across this state when it comes to reform. It's never easy work. And if you think it is, you need to find something else to do, is what I tell people. Absolutely.
Senator McClendon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Taylor, for being here, and thank you for your willingness to take this job.
Thank you, sir.
As we talked, this committee, this committee's made up of Republicans and Democrats, but we come together as a group, putting both of those parties aside because we have one goal, which is to give our children the best education that we can. Our grandfathers and grandmothers wanted the best for our mothers and fathers, better than what they had. We want the best for our children, better than what we had. We want that to continue to grow through our state. How much does, we have new businesses that come up. We need a workforce. The first thing they ask for is tax abatements. We're going to come in, we're going to provide these jobs. Should we curtail maybe some of that back and ask them to give money back to the school system that you're coming into? You need a workforce. Well, help us grow you a workforce. And I'm going to ask one long run-on question. How much are we willing to offer children? It's okay to work with your hands. It's okay to be a plumber. It's okay to be a welder, electrician. Liberal arts degrees don't get you a guaranteed job where if you've got this coming out of high school, you can make a living better than what your parents, better than what your grandparents. How much is pre-K before these children get to first grade? How important is it for that child when you meet someone of first impression? What does that do to a person? Hi, I'm so-and-so. And children that have never had any kind of formal reading or attention to them when they get to first grade. And they see these other children knowing ABCs, knowing how to count to 10 or 20, knowing what a planet is. And we've talked all about bringing our weakest links up. we've got to also bring to this table, what are we going to do for STEM? What are we going to do for accelerated kids that want to excel? Are we just going to say, okay, well, here's the bar, everybody just glide over it? Are we going to say, reach for the moon? Because there's something past the moon that you can go for. Now, I know that's one big, long question, and we had this talk last night.
Yeah.
Where I live, I'm very fortunate. We're
Absolutely.
Senator Parker. We're so fortunate. Our problems are great problems to have. You know, and I've said this in this committee, but we consider ourselves the #1 school district in the state of Mississippi. 35,000 kids. 52% Caucasian, 48% other. We have 35 different languages spoken in DeSoto County schools. 35 different languages. But yet, our community is willing to give to those schools. Do we point fingers at the other 81 counties and say, okay, we give 35% extra ad valorem to our school districts? Is it time for y'all to ante up and we take it off the state's burden?
So I'll, and I certainly hope you redirect if I don't answer everything that you said. So one, yes, I think is absolutely proper to ask businesses to invest in the local education system. And so when you talk to those businesses, they're usually ready to make those kinds of investments because they know it affects their bottom line. And a quality system is what they want. When we talk about kids being able to work with their hands, that is absolutely one of my priorities in terms of how we give kids more CTE credential attainment opportunities, meaning that every kid has to have the ability to be able to go directly into the workforce and have the skills that they need in order to be successful, have the knowledge to be easily trained in whatever local industry may be. And so that is absolutely our responsibility. As an educator, I take on the fault that we've made over the last 20 years by putting a focus on career and college readiness, but the focus really was on college readiness, hoping that a kid could go into the workforce if they chose not to. But we forgot to make sure that there was a focus on them obtaining those credentials. And now we've seen the error in our mistakes. And that is why that is an essential part of what I see as my priorities. And so we absolutely want to do that. When we talk about accelerating kids, I'm a firm believer that we never forget about those kids that are high achievers. I've had the opportunity to serve both as an academically gifted program director and the special education program director at the same time. And so that means that I understand absolutely where those parents come from that want their children accelerated, but also where those parents come from that know their kids have special needs. And so that is what I see as a responsibility that we have as educators to make sure we have all of those opportunities available. I think you've heard me talk about local communities investing in themselves. And so we should look at DeSoto County and the others like that as a beacon of what an investment in yourself can give as a return. And so what turned out to be a great investment and a great opportunity for yourself has now turned into a problem because now everybody wants to come into DeSoto and not do it the right way. And so that does present a problem with districts, but we can show every district that if you are poor and you don't have the economic base, then it's all the more important that you make a focused investment in your education system. You know, the example that I can use now is talking about Tallahatchie. I understand there's going to be a solar farm that's constructed there, probably 200 or 300 construction jobs. And after that, probably 20 to 40 permanent jobs. And so that means we need to make sure that those districts are giving those kids an opportunity to learn about how to maintain those kinds of solar farms. And that is going to be a productive job for them right there in that county. And so we have that opportunity all across the state. One of the things that I was going to say is that as a state, we are ripe for investment by businesses. And it is up to those local communities to understand How can I get a 50 job industry to come here, knowing I can't get a 2,000 job industry to come? But there are all those possibilities. It is the responsibility of the school district to work with economic development to make sure those things happen.
Senator Norwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to thank Mayor Altman and Dr. McGee for their service to the state. And Dr. McGee, we go way back when I served on the school board for 3 years here in the city of Jackson, and I lean a lot on his support when he was working with the Madison County School, and Mayor Altman is my neighbor, so I appreciate you all's service. Dr. Taylor, one thing that I heard you talk about during your presentation is accountability. And I can appreciate the fact that you accept the responsibility of being held accountable and responsible, if you will, for the tasks that you would be charged with carrying out. Now, you know, also with that come, you got to have tough skin, because you would have to hold folks that doesn't think like you think, act like you act, look like you look, have the skill set that you have, but you have to hold them accountable and responsible, because the end goal is to make sure that the children is best served. Is that something that, is your skin tough enough to handle that?
The answer is a resounding yes. And Senator Norwood, what I tell people is that most people love me until they don't love me. And so for me, it is about accountability. The one thing that I take more serious than anything else is the education of children, because I know and understand that a bad teacher can ruin a kid for life. And so if you can't show up and do what's necessary to do that in the right way, then you need to find something else to do. And so there are going to be times where I've got to go and confront people and say, what you're doing is not productive. Now, the tough thing for me is that we are a local controlled state. And so much of what happens is at the local level in the district. And so what I will tell people is that now I'm here to help you recognize that you're not doing something that's based on what statute says you should be doing. Now, if you're not able to follow those regulations and do the things that are necessary, now we do have an accreditation standard that has over 30 standards, and we can come in and do the examinations that's necessary. Now, I don't want to come in here and take this place over, but when I go to the board, I'm going to go with the evidence that I have and that I need to show them and the legislature, whomever is involved, that it's time for us to go in because children are at stake. And so those are never pleasant conversations to have. That is why I absolutely see it my responsibility to get into those places and help them build capacity, help them to understand what are the scientific and proven ways to do work. But now, if you can't do that, then we got a different problem. You know that I've talked about how many local boards can also be the hindrance to a district moving forward. And so part of that work is also working with the School Boards Association and those local boards, saying that give a superintendent the support and the flexibility to be able to hire the people that are going to be able to do the work and make your educational system better. And that in a district, if the only thing that's viable there is the school district, then board members can't put pressure on administrators to say, hire my cousin or hire my uncle. They'll make a great first grade teacher. You know, your uncle is a tractor mechanic and he doesn't have a degree. How can he teach first grade? And so that you don't need, that is the accountability piece. And my skin is as tough as they come. I salute a colonel every day when I go home. So I got to be tough.
Okay. My next question, in terms of going back to what Senator Boyd had talked about in terms of the low performing districts and the investment that we have made and continue to make, annually. And at some point in time, throwing money at this problem is not necessarily the answer. And the expectations for our low performing districts are the same as expectations for low income district are the same as it is for higher income. And one of the things that for too long, and from experience, the human capital. How can you work with within the framework of your responsibility to direct the human capital to basically help you, to help the individuals at the local level identify where they are and develop the skill set and the frame that's necessary to turn that district around. Because if you turn it around and come on back to Jackson, then when you leave, it's going to go back. So you have to empower those individuals. How can you do that?
And so that is a key piece about how you help a district build capacity. And so that's about the collective effort that you have in a group of small districts if necessary, given that knowledge to that local board and that administration about how you build the framework so that in the absence of anyone, you don't lose the traction that you've made over a 2 or 3 year period. So it is about the human capital. And the toughest thing that these low performing small districts face, it will be continuous, it never goes away, is the fact that they will always struggle to get high quality human capital in place. And there will be a high propensity for that human capital to leave. That is where it's important that every district can make that investment in the leadership that does have a tendency to stay longer, so that as new people matriculate in, you already have this framework of how you train teachers. And so that means that right now you may have access to an MDE literacy coach that's going to come on a limited basis for a finite amount of time. But now that means that as a district, I may need to get you to understand how you need to hire your own literacy coach that you have full time to do this work in your district. And so it's about connecting them to resources that they may not necessarily have and how they can combine resources and regionally when necessary. And so if I think about a high quality technology facilitator, that can be shared between 2 districts. If I think about a high quality chief academic officer, that can be shared between 2 districts. And so they do have the ability to be able to share resources, but it is about knowing that their isolated situations and small situations is going to cause it, that capacity, human capital to be very transient. And that is just the nature of the world that they live in. But if they don't plan to live in that world, then they're going to be subject to putting something in place and somebody leaving and they're left with nothing. They have to know that there's a tiger in the woods and they've got to be ready and prepared when the tiger jumps out.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. One of my biggest concern is, as Ms. Autumn mentioned, low enrollment within our local school district across the state. What are your plans in addressing that, and how can we get parents more involved?
And so we know that all the issues related with low enrollment have to do with COVID and students that have left and in many cases have not returned to school. So districts have had the resources to make sure that schools are safe for student return. And so that's the first thing that we've got to do, is to make sure that those parents understand that we've taken the opportunity to upgrade HVAC systems. We got all of the sanitary things necessary to make sure that this school is safe for your child's return. The second part of that is to make sure that we have quality instruction taking place in school. The one thing that I know solves most problems in a school is quality instruction by a good teacher. And so when parents know and understand that the district is a quality district, then they want their kids to be there. I want to doubly make sure that every district that receives Title I money, and they all do, that a huge part of that program is the parent and family engagement component. And so I'll make sure that our State Department looks closely at those applications to make sure that they have robust family engagement plans. We don't want those to be plans where they just check a box and that we improve it, but we want to ask detailed questions about how do you use this required funding to make sure you have structures that can help you as a district break these yokes and get parents more involved in education. I think the one thing that we all know is that the number one indicator of how well a child does is how involved are their parents in their education. And so I appreciate you asking that question, but that is really what the work is all about, making sure that districts understand that they have required resources to put towards that. And so that idea is make schools safe, make schools clean, and make sure you have quality instruction going on. And that is what will make people want to come to your district.
Senator Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this discussion today as background. When I first came into the legislature, we confirmed the previous superintendent without as much discussion and background. And so just to give you some idea of where this long talk comes from, it comes from maybe some previous times where we did not have this. So I appreciate your time. And I've researched it a little bit, and I've looked into kind of your views, particularly on career technical education. In the last few years, it's been a priority of myself and the Lieutenant Governor in particular to look at the labor participation rate and to try to find ways where we can reach down into the K through 12 system and make advancements to move that forward going into the future. We also have people in the audience today from the Office of Workforce Development Accelerate that's put in place to try to become a natural partner outside of education to help facilitate that. And so I guess what my question is on this is, I know after we put their office in place, we set up a deputy commissioner in corrections because we felt strongly that within corrections, we needed a conduit or a connection to the Office of Workforce Development so that two agencies that are vitally important to the success of students and people out in the career world are connecting and meeting. And so I don't know if you've had the opportunity to meet much yet, with Accelerate, but if you have not, I would like you to. And also my question would be, in setting up your administration, would you be willing to devote or create some resources where you can work directly with their department, so that we have a team approach moving forward on this instead of having things kind of working maybe separately?
Absolutely. And that is one of the scheduled meetings that I have. What we cannot do is work in silos. And so if we talk about economic development, we have to be at the table as educators with everybody that's involved. And so all of those items that you talked about is absolutely what we have to do. I am committed to that. That is what I know is a success, being able to have those conversations with everybody that's involved in economic development. Our job is to make sure that we are providing the kind of graduates that business and industry needs. And so any opportunity that we have to collaborate with any particular section to develop that kind of landscape, I am absolutely committed to that because I know that it works.
And I wanted to bring that to your attention because when we first started the career coach program, there was a little bit of pushback in at least some areas by MDE because the career coaches they're not employees of MDE. They're working outside of the education model, and I just want to be sure that, their role and their connection, which would then be to the economic developers, to the ecosystem model that's been put in place is an important connection to make. And although they're not under the same accountability model that your teachers will have for you, I want them to be viewed, in Department of Education as a key partner in what we're trying to do in the long run, because I think they can be. And just to your point earlier of the first grade teacher not needing to be a tractor driver, while I agree that that's the case, We do in education need to recognize that we do need tractor drivers in the state of Mississippi. And some of those students at, in their later years of high school, we need to encourage them, and sometimes, and what we did in that is we do have the ability to have some tractor drivers who are not certified as teachers come in through the CTE program now, and come in and give training in that, because, if we are going to continue to fill those vital agricultural roles in the state, we need to have that be a priority, and something that we're looking at. And my question would be, would you agree?
Absolutely, I would agree. When you think about career coaches, certainly the MDE may have argued that they're not under our control. But for me, a career coach has a job that we know how valuable and important a career coach is. And so it doesn't matter to me who pays the person, what agency they work under. If I'm able to collaborate with them, then we're going to be working towards the same goal. And when we talk about kids going into the workforce, and I'll certainly apologize if I disparage a tractor mechanic, because that wasn't the intent. But I do understand skill attainment and how very important that is. And most of those skill positions that go into the workforce, they make more than teachers. And so one of my most memorable experiences was an 18-year-old graduate that we had in one of my high schools that was an excellent welder. And at 18, he graduated and had a job making $48,000 a year. And the 20-year veteran teacher was only making about $45,000 a year.
Right.
And so those are the kinds of opportunities that we know exist all across the state. If you go up in the Delta, you see tractors and diesel, whatever the case may be, and they have to be maintained. And I know the people that do that work make way more than the teacher. So I agree 100%.
And I look forward to helping you make the connections you need with their office, because I do, to your point, see you as partners in the system going forward. And it's better to bring that to your attention now than to bring it to your attention in the future. So thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Senator Polk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Taylor, SMTTT.
You know it, Southern Miss to the top.
My first question to you is, looking at your information, you did graduate from probably the best university in the state of Mississippi in 1990. But then you didn't go to work till 1994 in North Carolina. Could you fill in those 4 years for me?
So I arrived in Fayetteville, North Carolina on 17 October 1992. And I began to work, it was, I want to say it was, I'm trying to think of this aircraft company, but they processed the mail. Lockheed is what it was. And so I got a job working at Lockheed, but also worked as a substitute teacher when I first arrived there in 1992, in the fall of 92. By the spring of 1993, I was working as a full-time substitute teacher at Spring Lake Junior High. And I did that until I got married in June of 1993 in West Point. And then all during that time, I was enrolling in the teacher education program at Fayetteville State University, continued my work at Lockheed. And then that spring of 1994, because I was enrolled in that teacher ed program and I had a college degree, I was able to go in and be hired as a full-time licensed teacher. And so that was in Stedman Junior High School. And then that following fall, I began at Douglasburg Junior High, which later became Douglasburg Middle School. And so I had the opportunity to work in schools as a substitute, as a full-time substitute, and as what they call a discipline coach, and then as a classroom teacher, and then from there on through administration. And before that, I worked in the Hattiesburg Public Schools as a teacher assistant, and that is why I decided to get into public education in the first place.
So you left Mississippi and went to North Carolina.
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit personally why you decided to do that, not stay in Mississippi?
Absolutely. And so I love to tell this story that when my wife and I got engaged, she was, Fort Bragg was her first duty station. And so what I tell people is that Uncle Sam said, if indeed you want to be married to her and be with her, you got to come to North Carolina. So like many people, that was her first duty station as a military officer. Our plan was for her to serve 4 years and then she'd get out, and we determined where we'd move at that point. But 30 years later, we ended up being there and had a wonderful educational career. She had a wonderful military career. And so like many things, it was not by design to stay in North Carolina, but that is where we ended up. But I tell people that we come home on multiple occasions. Her family is from West Point. My family is from Laurel. I don't do hunting, but my brothers and I own about 80 acres down in Greene County. And so we go down, we hunt all the time. We've owned that for over 20 years. My mom still lives in Laurel. And so I take every opportunity to come home and visit the state. I think what's key about your question is people ask, well, why are you coming back to Mississippi? If you want to know the answer to that question, talk to the state superintendent of North Carolina, talk to the executive director, talk to those people that I've worked with, because probably for the last 10 years, I've talked about my desire to return to Mississippi and do exactly what I'm doing right now. I know that in order to do that, it takes a lot of grace and mercy. And so that's why I'm so appreciative of the opportunity to be in this position to come back. And so my desire was not necessarily to leave the state, but it was because my wife was serving in the military. And I will not trade that experience for anything in the world, because it completely changed my understanding of what service and duty to a country is and the sacrifice that those families make and those soldiers.
She's stationed in North Carolina the entire 29 years.
Yes and no is the answer to that question. And so she served from 92 to 97 on active duty. And then after that, she became a reservist, and she's been mobilized probably 3, 4, 5 times since then. She did 1.5 years in Fort Riley, Kansas, setting up the SRP Soldier Readiness Program, which they still use today. She served in Virginia Beach. She served in Washington, D.C. She served, did some time in Pennsylvania and New York. And so she's been mobilized and called up on several occasions. So she has over a 35-year career, about 11 or 12 years of active duty service. And so so while North Carolina was our home, she's been all over the place.
Where I'm going with this is one of the things we talk about here in the legislature more often than probably anything else is keeping our brain drain from happening. Make sure our students in Mississippi graduate and stay in Mississippi. You have a reason why you left, but you spent 29 years away. And now you're coming back to become the highest paid superintendent of education in America. How do I explain to those young men and women 29 years ago that decide to stay in Mississippi and make Mississippi schools much better, and as we pointed out today, so much better, and you were not here to see that or work for that? How do I explain that to those men and women?
So the explanation that you give to young men and women is that opportunity comes in all shapes and sizes, and that if you decide to engage in military service, there's an opportunity to do that in Mississippi. There's an opportunity to do it outside of Mississippi, to do it all over the world. Our goal is certainly to make sure that opportunities are here in the state, so we prevent what you call as the brain drain. I agree 100% about that. The ability to be able to come back to the state, we want to be able to tell any citizen of this state is that if you have the ability to come back and contribute to this economy and to this landscape, then we certainly want to welcome any native son back home, a native daughter. And so people will always make the opportunity to leave. And I certainly do understand your position to say, how am I going to tell a kid he's been gone for 29 or 30 years and now he's coming back? And so that is about opportunity comes in all shapes and forms, and that I think it's good that we have someone who knows and understands the state, knows what a quality education can do, and can bring experience that can help us go even beyond where we are. And so that is certainly a criticism that I will get, but I welcome that because that is a feeling that a person will have, and the only thing I can do is to share with them my thoughts about why I left and why I've come back.
Change subjects a little bit. The chair, the committee that I chair is Accountability, Efficiency, and Transparency. It has a lot to do with procurement in the state of Mississippi. And I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that I felt your predecessor, your permanent predecessor, did not at all do a good job procuring for one of the largest state agencies in Mississippi. What can you do, and what is your commitment to this legislature to spend the monies that you have in an honest, fair, and efficient way?
And so we will always have conversations about what monies to be spent on. I think the state is absolutely clear in what procurement procedures are. The only thing I know to do is to follow those. I can't do anything that's outside of what you prescribed as to how we procure anything. And so I think that is one of my biggest responsibilities, to make sure that we follow what that law is about how we procure anything. And I think I'd certainly like to think that the department takes the opportunity to come back and talk with the legislature about how they've spent money and what that return on investment is. And so my goal would be to make sure that whatever those procurement procedures are, I don't look good in black and white is what I can tell you. And so for me, it really is about making sure we follow the law, because it's kind of like what I told people as a leader of an organization. There are certain things I can't defend you from, and the board certainly cannot defend me if we have a procurement process that I'm not following. And so if that's the case, I probably will never come before you guys, because Mrs. Altman and the rest of us say, you know, Dr. Taylor, you got to go. You don't have to go home, but you got to get up out of here because you're not following the rules. And so that is the promise that I can make you, that we will follow the rules. I know of no other way to do it.
Next question of you would be, I was looking at your record, and the only record we had as your superintendent of your county school was that the number of B, C, D, F schools. And when I look at that over 5 years, I don't see significant change one way or the other. Should we have seen some improvement in that school district? And not, if not, why not?
And so that was significant improvement. And so with any time that you have a state assessment system, they go back and renorm those assessments. And so performance will go down, and that is across the entire state. And so we've never been what you would classify as a low performing district. When I came into that district, the graduation rate was in the low 80s. When I left, we were at about 93%. When I came to that district, we did not have an early college. We started one, and I think the first class graduated last May. We developed a great articulation agreement with our community college, and by the time I left, we had about 41 or 42 kids graduating with associate degrees, in many cases, 2 of those. We had a private school there, and we had students that began to leave the private school and come back to the public school because of the opportunities that we created. And so when you look at that performance of the district, you're talking about in North Carolina, they tier districts as tier 1, 2, and 3, with tier 1 being the poorest, and we were a tier 1 district. And so that meant that we didn't have those resources like some wealthy communities. And so the opportunity to talk about digital teaching and learning standards, I was recognized by the state for that work. I've spoken nationally on the things that we've done. When it comes to nutrition in that district, we were a model in the state in terms of how you get children involved in innovative feeding programs. I've spoken nationally about that. I've had an opportunity to talk about the digital work that we've done with the state and the partnerships that we've had. And so when you look at Bladen County Schools, we were a successful district based on the demographics that we've had. And those students had tremendous performance over the decade that I was there as superintendent.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I'll let him take a break, and I'd like to ask Ms. Altman some questions.
Yes, sir.
Let Senator Polk finish his questions, and then we'll take questions from Senator Jordan, Senator Hill, and Senator DeBar before we wrap up. I do want to remind the committee, if you do get up and leave, to please leave the peer packets here on the table.
Thank you. Question I have of you is back to what I was talking to Dr. Taylor about. I'm very concerned that we're bringing someone back to Mississippi who left. And we have a lot of good school people in Mississippi. And you said that one of the things, you can't go from a district superintendent to a state superintendent easily. I believe it was something similar to that. Dr. Taylor was 2 years as the deputy superintendent in North Carolina. Assuming that what you said is correct, you feel like those 2 years were enough as head of curriculum to be able to run our statewide system better than someone else?
Yes, I do. And yes, what the board found. To go back to our top candidates, Dr. Taylor was the only one who had State Department experience, but also his other experience in the time that he was principal, in the time that he was a deputy superintendent, in the time that he worked with special education and early childhood. All of those things across the board gave him a tremendous amount of experience and a tremendous amount of equipping. It's not absolutely impossible. And we have had superintendents who came directly out of a school district into the superintendency, but I can tell you that just in my time on the board, things have gotten much more complicated. Programs have gotten much more difficult to manage. There are a lot more federal requirements. COVID, as you well know, threw us a whole new world. And so you have to have someone who has experience in dealing with some of those things. We have some very bright superintendents out there who are very capable when they get more experience. And we had one that was in our application that his recommendations were good, but to a person, they said he needs more experience, he's not ready. And that doesn't mean that he can't do it at some point. He just didn't have the experience. So we again, collectively speaking, the board had full confidence. Dr. Taylor bubbled up every time in all the questions that we asked him. We spent, well, I'm repeating myself, but we spent 4 hours with him, and not any of us knew what the other one was going to ask in that second interview. And we grilled him pretty hard, pretty long, and pretty tight. And he satisfied us in that we felt like he was absolutely the right person to take us. We do not want to lose momentum. We don't want to lose the trajectory that we're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Jordan.
Dr. Taylor. Dr. Taylor, I believe we have 140 school districts in Mississippi. I believe some thereabout. About 2 decades ago, 25, 26 years ago, we came up with a bill called character education, where basic principles that some students may not get in their home. What are your feeling on teaching that character education become a part of the curriculum in the 140 school districts we have, just so students that may come from homes where the parents, for various reasons, just may not even know the kind of character that they need to be developing, and they need to get it from elsewhere. would you be willing that each district adopt some form of character education, like basic principle, thank you, and yes, sir, and basic principle that goes along with high school education?
Absolutely. If we haven't adopted a character education curriculum, I would certainly encourage every district and every school to do so. I've taught character education my entire career. That is an essential part of how we get students to understand how to be good citizens in our country.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
We wrote the bill about 25 years ago, but most school districts don't adopt it.
And so that is the tough part about being an educator, is that you got to teach children content, but you also got to teach them how to be good citizens. And so that's why early childhood education is so important, because the biggest fight I have is with kindergarten teachers that say, we want these pre-K kids to be learning the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. No, it's about child-based play, so that when they get in your classroom, they know how to act. And so you're absolutely right that many kids come from situations where their parents don't know what's proper character, proper behavior. Is more important that we do that now in the digital world, because kids can get online and do stuff from home that they before would have to do in person with someone. So I think that's very important.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor, for indulging us to answer these questions today. I believe you and I have something in common, although I don't think our paths crossed. We were both at the University of Southern Mississippi in 1990. I graduated in 1991 with a degree in science education and went on and took my teacher licensing exam and got licensed in Mississippi. Looking at your background in this peer report, it states that you wrote for a Black opposition newspaper at UMC, The Unheard Word. Can you just tell us a little bit about your experience with that?
Absolutely. And this is, I think, the one thing that I've been so anxious to answer, because I think it will speak to what I know is human growth. The Unheard Word was a Black newspaper at the university at the time. And I actually only wrote one article for that. And so I liken the Unheard Word to Muhammad Ali, someone who was a villain in the 60s, but an American hero in the 80s. And so in 2019, the university celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Unheard Word in the studies program, Black Studies program. And so I was asked to comment on 3 different issues. One of those was what should the university be doing for its minority students? So what I said is that they could certainly collaborate with HBCUs and understand the kinds of programs that they have in place, but also take the opportunity to know that those students may be first-generation college students. They may need a specific kind of support, but ultimately those students are responsible for themselves for showing up and being responsible students. The second thing was about Black Greek organizations and what could they do. And I said they can provide leadership. They were, when Black students began to come to the universities in the early 70s, those Greek organizations came with leadership structures. And so it's their responsibility to continue to provide that kind of leadership, although others can do it. And the third question was, why did you write for the Unheard Word? And so what I talked about is that at that time, when I was a young college students, my view of the world is that we said that we saw Mississippi as the most racist state in the union, and we wanted to bring attention to some things that we felt needed to be talked about. And so that was me reflecting on what I believe 30 years ago. And what I would encourage anybody who has any questions is to go back and read that article for yourself and read it in the context that it was written. And my legislative person actually has copies of those. And so that is what that was about, to say that that was my worldview at 20-some years old, over 34 years ago. I've had the opportunity to travel all over the place and meet and understand people from different walks of life. One of the things that I was going to talk about is what is personal growth, and that more than anything, I accept my own shortcomings, and I recognize that I am not the same person that I was when I was 20 years old. And so,
Thank God we all not.
that is so true. And so, but I think the one thing that I've always had and always governed myself by is acceptance and tolerance. And so one of the things I talked about, and this will come out in the Talent, which is the university magazine at Southern Miss, and it should be coming out relatively soon. And I talked about what Dr. McMillan told me, who was probably my greatest university mentor. And he told me, Robert, speak softly and make people strain to hear you, and you have their undivided attention. And so what he taught me is that you may have people that oppose your views, but if you speak in a manner and a tone that polarizes people, they never hear you. And so be that kind of person, but also be willing to listen and understand where other people are. And so that was the reflection of where I was 30 years ago. Again, I only wrote one particular article, but I encourage everybody to read it in its entirety and see the context that it was seen.
So North Carolina did give you the opportunity to move from a superintendent in a local school district up into a deputy superintendent position.
Yes, ma'am. The state superintendent of North Carolina is elected. Catherine Truitt was that person. I worked with her as a member of her advisory council when she was a chancellor at Western Governors University in North Carolina. She was the education advisor to Governor McCrory when he was in office there. And so when she got elected, she called me probably 3 days later and told me she wanted me to come and serve as one of her deputies. And so I can tell you that the experience that I gained working there, understanding how a State Department is administered, knowing how to work with a legislature in developing educational programs and funding, I think that was all the difference in terms of me being able to function in this position. And so one of the great things I was able to do is not only work as a deputy in the department, but also to build stronger bridges between the department and school districts out in the field. And so that is sometimes the issue that state departments are not seen as service oriented. And so we were absolutely able to make the department that way. And that is absolutely the experience that I bring here. We can continue to do the same thing here at the EMD.
I want to follow up on one more thing. Senator Wiggins talked about some of the education reforms that the legislature had made and that the schools actually implemented. And it was like wailing and gnashing of teeth to do this. And I think a lot of states have done it. And what we did in that, you know, doing the graded schools like North Carolina's done and writing the third grade reading gate that other states are looking at, my colleagues had the faith in allowing me to write that bill, the third grade reading gate. So I didn't have a whole lot of years in the classroom, but I knew what worked. And too many times in education, we see fads come along where people are just trying to sell material and you're shaking your head. You know what I'm talking about. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. We've spent so much money and so much time, and we've cost so many kids a good education by following these bandwagon things. And I just want you to understand that when we got something that's working and it's not broke, and every other state is looking to Mississippi because we put basically the phonetic science back into reading, we need to build on that. And I think that we need to look at our math, and we need to move into where we're deficient in math, especially in the middle school math, and work toward that. And you know, maybe even have another gate and get kids proficient in math and reading. So that's the movement that I want to go in. If you're confirmed into this position, I hope that you would share, because I was taught in education, a lot of what you see out of students is what you expect out of them. Some of it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I liked what you said about that if you got a rich kid here and a poor kid here and you got the right environment, you can teach both of them how to read. And I know that for a fact because I did it many times. So I appreciate your candid answers for that. And that's all I have for you today.
Thank you, Mayor.
Senator DeWar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Taylor, good afternoon.
I wish I could say I'm saving the best for last, but I think Senator Johnson's left. But thank you for being here. Thank you for moving down here and packing up and selling everything on the hope and prayer that you'll get confirmed. I appreciate that. Hopefully the board explained that to you when you took the position. I want to talk about all the things you've talked about involve money and spending money on public education. And wouldn't you agree with that? And, you know, we've passed a bill this year that would inject $181 million into the MAEP to fully fund MAEP, which could do the things that you're talking about. How important or what would that do to the department? What would it do to public education if that were to be approved, if the $181 million was injected into our school districts across the state?
And so the whole thing is making sure that everyone understands what is the proper use of funding. And so when we talk about full funding, we all understand the importance of what that allows us to do. But we also have to understand that the funding does not solve all problems. It gives us the ability to be able to build that capacity within the district. You can't build capacity if you don't have the proper funding and support. By providing that, then the onus absolutely comes back to us as educators, because we've asked you to fund something, and now we have to be able to bring the proof back that we've used it properly and it is giving us the results that we need. And so I agree with you 100% that it allows us to build that capacity, and our biggest responsibility is to make sure that we use it the way that we said we want to use it. And we've come to the Senate and we've come to the House and we've done those presentations about what we want to do in the budget. And if we don't do that, I got some tough questions to have to answer.
And so that follows up to my next question. If confirmed, in the last 4 years, I've really not seen anybody from the department, let alone the state superintendent, advocate for funding of public schools. In the fall, we'll get a list of technical bills. Hey, we want to approve that. I'll see the superintendent at their appropriation subcommittee meeting, and that's it. And it's all about these technical changes, technical bills, but no one has ever, you know, I see agency heads over here harassing Senator Hobson and other subcommittee chairmen, but no one from the department in the 4 years I've been here has come over and lobbied for public education and funding for public education. Is that something that you will commit to doing for the next education chairman, next appropriation chairman, in the next term if you're confirmed?
So I can tell you that I don't know what has been done in the past, but I know how I plan to operate. And so part of that is to be able to have conversations with the legislature about what we believe is important in education. I think what's equally important is that we have the opportunity to listen to what it is that you'd like to see in education. It's the same approach that I take with a business community. Tell me the kind of graduates you want. I don't know that if I don't talk with the business community. And so that is absolutely the commitment that I have if I'm selected as the state leader, to be able to have that kind of conversation, to come and talk about what is important to the MDE and what is important to school districts. When I come and have those conversations, it's not about what Robert Taylor or the MDE or the state board wants. That has to be based on the conversations that I've had with superintendents, the principals, and school boards as well. And so I welcome having those conversations. The only thing that I would ask is that if me and my staff come too much, just let us know and we'll dial it back. So.
And I think you've started to do this already. One of the issues superintendents for the last several years have made comments to me about is we don't see the state superintendent. This person's never out. We don't hear from them. Only time we hear from them is if we're getting criticized or harassed about something. Will you make a commitment to these school superintendents across our state to engage with them, stay engaged with them, form a committee, whatever you need to do to get their opinions, to see what is really going out in the field? That way you can adopt and help them, help their students?
What I can tell you, Senator Barr, is that those relationships have already been established. If if I talk to my staff, I don't always hear everything, but they talk to me about the chatter that they hear, that, you know, everybody likes the fact that you're out and you're meeting superintendents. And so that's not to disparage anybody that came before me. I know work looks different in different ways, but I've been to several RISA meetings. I've met superintendents from the southern part of the state. I'm scheduled to go to RISAs in the northeast part of the state. I went, as I said, the School Boards Association. I've visited probably 15 or 16 districts in the short time that I've been here. What I've said to superintendents is that, and principals and teachers, I cannot do this work if I don't engage with you. And so the first commitment for me was to visit all of the low performing districts so I can understand what their barriers were from their perspective, but also see that for myself. But it's equally important that I go into those high performing districts, look at cases of excellence and things that can be reproduced in other places. The work can't be done without getting out into the field, and we can't be a regulatory agency. So that is a promise that I make you, and that is the only way I know how to do this job.
The enrollment in our schools across the state is declining about 1.6% every year, and it has for the last numerous years. Obviously, our school funding is tied to our enrollment, our ADA. With the amount of students decreasing and continuing on this pace, we have 140 school districts. What's your opinion on maintaining the status quo of the number of school districts we have across the state, of about 140? Do we need to look at consolidation? Do we need to look at leaving things the status quo? What's your opinion on that?
So I will probably lose some cool points in the field now, and I got to be careful where I go now, but I absolutely think that districts have to look at how they consolidate and how they combine resources, particularly when you look at a small number of districts that are duplicating services and they can't build capacity. And so I absolutely believe that local districts should come together and decide this is what we need to do. And then at the proper and right time, if the state legislature has to come in and make that decision. And so I don't think we need more than 100 school districts, but I'll obviously learn more about that as I move across the state and become way more familiar with how districts operate. I can tell you that I went to Laurel High School and all of my family, and I know there was a Laurel City district and there was the Jones County district. That's the only thing I really knew and understood. But now when you come back into this field, you're like, why are there so, and I understand it was more than 141. So yes is the answer to that.
Well, I won't let the fact that you're from Jones County disqualify you right off the bat. You know, a lot of states, a lot of the trend across the country, especially I think Arkansas most recently has adopted school choice statute. Don't know if that's coming to Mississippi. I don't know for sure or not, but what's your opinion on school choice? Is it an option for Mississippi? Is it something that we should be looking at or not? And how should we go forward on that?
And so it all depends on the kind of school choice that you develop. And so within a district, if you provide school choice within a district, you want to make sure that you set that up where it doesn't create disparities. And so that means that if you've got specific kinds of programs such as an IB Academy, an engineering academy, a health academy, then you want to situate it to where parents have an opportunity to choose a curriculum or a setting that they believe is good for their children. But if we set school choice up based on this school is a great school and this school is a poor school, what is any sane parent going to do? They're going to choose the good school. So it's about how we create a structure that doesn't allow one place to have a bad school structure, another place to be good. What I tell people is that the one thing I absolutely respect is a parent's right to choose what they want to do with their children. Our responsibility as educators is to make sure that we have a vibrant public education system, whether people decide to send their kids there or not.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. I got no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think we've had plenty of questions. I'll just wrap up by saying that in my opinion, the state superintendent of education is one of the most important nominations that are confirmations that the Senate handles for multiple reasons. And we see that in the money that we put towards education, whether you think it's enough or not, it is a significant part of the state's budget. And it deals with K through 12 education, which is arguably one of the biggest indicators of future success for students or people in our state and across the nation. I think that the role is extremely difficult because you essentially have two boards, the Board of Education and the legislature, and you're held accountable on student success amongst 140 some odd semi-autonomous districts. And so I don't know if that means that you're crazy for wanting the job, but I do think it's one of the most difficult jobs that someone can do. And so we appreciate you being here today. I hope that you see that the legislature truly represents all parts of the state. And it truly represents every type of demographic in the state. And a commonality that you should see here today is that we all care about students in Mississippi. We all care about education. And while we disagree and it can be thrown out that we have large disagreements, it's civil discourse where we try to find the right avenues. And as you said, we've been successful over the last few years in finding better ways to improve education in Mississippi. With that, I hope that if you are confirmed, that you will continue to have civil discourse with the legislature and allow us to work together to better Mississippi. That being said, thank you very much for entertaining our questions for the past 2 hours. And thank you, Ms. Altman, for being here as well. We greatly appreciate y'all's time. And with that, thank you all very much. We'll wrap this up.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity.